What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, and with another round of AFL action in the books, it is time to deep dive into another edition of the round recap, which is pretty simple in premise. We sit down and reflect on the previous round of AFL action. We go through each and every game from start to finish. We talk about the best, we talk about the worst, any controversies that might have popped up with umpiring decisions or some suspensions. I give votes for who I think was best on in those games. We talk about a team of the week. It all goes down. And today's video is especially interesting because I feel round 19 was very peculiar in design and with outcome, because we had some games here that yet again presented us with opportunities to see whether true contenders were contenders or pretenders. Some lived up to the moniker, some fell very short, and there were some games that even saw some shifting on the bottom end of the ladder shift as well. So we've got a lot to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. I am keen to dive into today's video, and it all kicked off on Thursday night with Essendon hosting GWS at Marvel Stadium. I mean this with absolutely no disrespect to any Essendon supporters out there, but this was a whitewash game from the announcement of the fact that this game was going down. I feel there was never truly any way that Essendon were going to overcome GWS in this match. Number of factors as to why, the first of which, obviously, is the extended injury list that we see Essendon now suffering from. It's not the first club in recent years that we have seen absolutely obliterated by injury. We only have to look at Richmond only a season or two ago, where we were up to, I think, 50 plus players total for that year, having played at least one game because we had so many out injured. We have seen West Coast absolutely hammered from pillar to post, especially during the COVID season, and Essendon are now being dealt up a incredibly bad fucking rap here, and it's to key components as well. It's not just a random group of ragtag players that are just falling down to an injury here or there. We're talking about Jai Caldwell, we're talking about Kyle Langford, we're talking about Mason Redman, who has come back but was out for a period of time, Ben McKay, or Mackay rather, I apologise. You know, there's a slew of other players that just seem to come back in and then they're injured again, or on their rehabilitation, they're doing wonders in making a return, and then all of a sudden injury creeps back in and they're back out again. It's a question that I feel, and I've spoken about at length with a very good friend of mine who is a very, very passionate Essendon supporter. I feel this is something that the conditioning staff need to be looked into at the end of the year. This is something that goes beyond the scope of just being unfortunate because an injury has occurred, because this is, you know, soft tissue injuries that they're failing to come back from. This is further soft injury tissues that just keep building up. You can excuse an injury like Nick Martin's ACL that recently went down only 2 weeks ago against Richmond, but like hamstrings and calves and things of that nature can be managed and can be worked upon within a player's, you know, training capacity to build the muscles up to be less vulnerable to breaking down like we have seen go down with Essendon this year. And unfortunately, when you're coming up against a team that is as stacked as GWS is, a team that has arguably one of the best lists in the competition, a team that is fighting for a top 8 spot and in my opinion is still a genuine premiership threat, it just spells doom. It truly does. It was just a matter at this point in time, even before the game started, of not GWS winning, but how much GWS would win by. I went out in my tipping video and said that I thought Aaron Cadman and Jesse Hogan would combine for 10 plus goals. Hogan didn't play this game, he was managed, so I don't know whether that was a kind of sleight of hand decision on the whole. You know, we're only playing Essendon, they're missing some key components, we're not really too worried about Jesse playing this game, we can afford to rest him. And, you know, when a top 8 team is playing against a bottom 6, bottom 7 team in the competition, you can afford to rest your best players. So somebody like a Jesse Hogan getting rest now is going to hold him in much better stead come September, come that finals break. But even without Jesse Hogan, I was convinced Aaron Cadman would still have a huge game. I said he would kick 4 to 5 goals. I believe he only kicked 1. I'll have to bring the stats up to talk about that, because he definitely Didn't perform to the level I expected him to. He only kicked... Yeah, he kicked 1 goal, 1, and had 9 disposals for the game. So Essendon did incredibly well to keep him under wraps, given the huge hauls that we have seen him have in the past month. But without Jesse Hogan, without Aaron Cadman getting off the chain, GWS still found a way to win this game by 48 points. And it was never truly at all, by any means, in Essendon's favour, the way of momentum. Even in the first quarter, when GWS led 2 goals straight to 5 behinds, you could argue, yeah, okay, Essendon kick straighter, they kick maybe 3 or 4 goals, they get an early lead, they can ride that momentum through. But even with those opportunities to score on goal, GWS, only having kicked 2 goals of their own, still seemed to maintain that level of command on the flow of the game, and their presence in the game was always felt. I feel Essendon were caught sleeping at the wheel numerous times, and just the run and carry from GWS's defensive half to get the ball forward half of the ground was absolutely sensational in this game. It was very much at part, especially in the first half and the second quarter, a training drill for GWS with just the ease that they were able to transition that football. But again, that doesn't come down to a skill differentiation. Again, though, with so many players out of Essendon's lineup, they're, relying on young kids to step up. Kids that have played only 2, 3, 4 games, playing key positions that are obviously going to break down fundamentally because they haven't adapted that skill set yet to be cohesive enough in a senior game of football. The second term, it was game over at halftime. As much as Essendon put up a bit of a scrap in the second half, GWS leading 8-3-51 to 1-8-14. It was just, as I said before we got into the scoreline, it was a matter of how much GWS was going to win this game by, and it looked like it was going to be absolutely damning at this point. 1 goal 8 at half-time meant that some stupid stat like in the past 22 scores that Essendon had put on the board, they had kicked... I think it was something like 1 goal 21 or something along those lines. It was huge. It wasn't good. It was not good at all. To their credit, they put up a very good fight in the second half. It was definitely a shift after half time, and something just started to click. These young kids started finding themselves around in the contest. They were bringing each other into the game. At 3/4 time, it was a 43-point lead the way of GWS, with 13-5-83 leading 5-10-40. So they came out and they kicked 4 goals too in that third term, which is more goals collectively than they had kicked in the previous 4 quarters of football, I believe, up until that point in time. And then the final score line was 16-8-104, defeating Essendon 7-14-56. So in the second half, GWS went on to kick 8 goals 5. Essendon went on to kick 6 goals 6, which again, in reflection, considering how they had been scoring up until that point in time, was a huge second term for them. I thought there were a few players individually that really turned it on. Some players still falling short of the mark, but again, you can probably forgive them, given the state that club is currently in with list management. GWS, on the other hand, pick up a win, but a percentage-boosting win, and that is something that I have been clamouring on about for the last couple of weeks with these top 8 teams. They need to be solidifying wins that are going to give them a decent percentage boost, and it will be reflected come closer to the end of this video when we look at the ladder and how that sits after 19 rounds as to how big percentage can come into play here. And that's going to lead on to a conversation point I had earlier today at the point of recording this with a good friend of mine, passionate West Coast supporter. We were talking about the game in hand that is still owed to the AFL community between Essendon and the Gold Coast. Now, his viewpoint is if Gold Coast are locked into the finals by a large margin, or they're out of the finals by a large margin, is there any point playing this game that is owed to Essendon? Because Gold Coast are going to absolutely flog Essendon at, and I say that lightly, it's going to be bad. It could be a game that ends up becoming the difference in the Gold Coast getting into the top 8. This could be a game that, if they're beaten enough, could have bearing on the draft come the end of the year. And I think the AFL themselves have pigeonholed themselves into this kind of mockery of a system where this game in hand that has been owed to us since round 0 because of terrible weather conditions should have been already played out in a different format. Maybe over the bye rounds they could have had that game played because they had already missed round 0. So if they had already missed a game that they were scheduled to have, why have them have a secondary bye? You know what I'm saying? That's why I said this round 0 bullshit that's going on and the extra bye rounds at the start of the year and then the mid-season fucking bye rounds, it's all a fucking debacle. It's going to cause more problems often than not. And unfortunately, Essendon at this point in time, with so many primetime slots as well, we're talking Thursday and Friday night games to finish out the season, they're playing some competition that have potential to absolutely belt the living fuck out of them and get percentage boosting wins. So, as a neutral supporter and a supporter that is coming from, supporting a team of my own that has gone through injury woes, has been on the back end of absolute beltings, I sympathise with Essendon so much. Very unfortunate circumstance they've gotten themselves in. But GWS, well and truly on the way to setting up a finals campaign, and I feel that they're only going to get more dangerous because they've got Jesse Hogan to come back in, Sam Taylor will come back in. This is a GWS outfit that when they have all those pieces in place, Brent Daniels as well, they could challenge for a flag this year 100%. I can feel it deep in my loins. The injury woes do continue for Essendon a little bit. Archer May came off the ground with a nose injury. He wasn't subbed out of the game or anything because the substitution had already been made for Essendon. I don't know whether it was just a superficial injury, whether he'll, play this week, whether he misses a week just for a little bit of clarity and some healing. But even minor injuries like that just further compacts how rough this list is currently undergoing it. We can't understate that at all. But with a almost 50-point win, when it came to looking at individual performances out of this game and trying to determine who I thought was best on ground, it was all GWS players that were thrown about, and there were probably some that were a little bit stiff not to get a vote. I thought Lockie Ash in defence was huge. He should be, at this point in time, at least for myself, an All-Australian lock. I feel he has had a sensational season. It's very much been a breakout year for him on the back end of last year, putting in a strong performance as well. So he misses a vote. There were a couple of other players. Finn Callaghan, I thought, had a really good game. He misses a vote. But the 3 players I landed on for the 3-2-1 voting system in this game, I feel, even though, some people might argue their impact on the game, or they might not have as many touches or accumulated the ball as much, I just feel the quality they delivered for the quantity they had set them apart just a little bit. So the 1 vote for this game I gave to Jake Stringer. I thought he was very influential on the game when that breakaway started to happen after that close first term. Whenever the ball was getting moved forward into that forward line, I felt more often than not it was Jake Stringer marking the ball, and they weren't paying much mind to him. He was grabbing it, he was bringing players into the game, he was setting up with some score assists. It was a great performance by the package, who is somebody that I get on board with bashing quite a bit when he underperforms as well. So for him to come out and play a great game kind of shut my mouth just a little bit. He had 18 disposals, 10 kicks and 8 handballs, 6 marks, 2 clearances, 314 metres gained, 3 goals and 8 score involvements on the return. For the 2 vote, I gave it to Lockie Whitfield, who some people might disagree with me, but I would probably have him in the All-Australian squad just ahead of Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, which is huge. I just feel Lockie Whitfield has been one of the most consistent halfback flankers in the competition from round 1 all the way through to this point in time. He, I feel, never puts a step forward. He might have some rounds where he doesn't accumulate like 25 plus, but still with the ball that he gets, he is so incredibly great with ball in hand. I just love how fluid and smooth moving he looks when he's running carrying. He's a complete player. I really feel he is having a stellar year as well and should be well and truly in that All-Australian conversation. He had 29 disposals, 19 kicks and 10 handballs, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 430 metres gained, and had the 3 score involvements. And best on ground, it wasn't hard to look past this guy. He was absolutely monumental, and whenever GWS are firing, this guy is popping off. And that was Tom Green. He had 30 disposals, 19 kicks and 11 handballs, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 16 clearances, 379 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements of his own. As I said, we're talking about two different teams on two different sides of the pendulum here. As that pendulum swings, on one side, it is swinging towards a club that has been decimated with injury, might be falling just short of expectation, given they probably should be contending for finals with the list that they have built, with all the, the trades they have made and the players that they have brought in. But injuries just absolutely knocked them from pillar to post, and that's why they are struggling as badly as they are. And then the ball swings on over to GWS, who at the start of the season started off incredibly strong. Then we saw them go through a patch where the inconsistency crept in and they would win one week and lose another. But I feel they're getting back to their strongest footy now, and with some key components to come back, they are going to be dangerous heading into September. Friday night footy was up at the Gabba and saw opportunity for Western Bulldogs to prove the naysayers wrong by knocking off the reigning premiers in Brisbane. The naysayers I'm talking about are the ones that are getting on board with this bandwagon of the Western Bulldogs being flat track bullies, in the essence of only being able to defeat the teams underneath them and struggling when it comes to taking on opponents above them. We saw in round 18, they were the home team at Marvel Stadium and they got done by Adelaide, who normally don't travel all too well, but they're starting to kind of kick that trend a little bit and they've really amped their season up. I'm really loving what Adelaide are doing. So coming off of a loss like that, and in a close loss as well, they have opportunity here to shut those critics up a little bit. If they can get this scalp, then maybe they'll start getting taken seriously as a finals threat, a premiership threat, because the loss to Adelaide the week prior saw them drop out of the top 8. And unfortunately, a loss here to Brisbane sees them remain out of that top 8 configuration, because it was Brisbane by 10 points in a game that I thought was pretty much dead rubber at 3/4 time. It was a game that I honestly thought Brisbane were going to come out in that final term, put the foot down, and this was going to be a 40 plus, 50 plus point win, just with how Brisbane had set themselves up with the flow of the game. Momentum was in their hands and they had taken so many scoring avenues away from the Western Bulldogs that it was just a matter of how much. Again, similar to GWS against Essendon. However, that being said, we saw in the second half Brisbane fall into a very familiar category that we have seen them fall into with the 2025 season in hand, and that is the inaccuracy in front of goal. They kicked 10 behinds in the final half of football, and that could have been costly, given the fact that even though they kicked those 10 behinds, they won this game by 10 points. Could have been and should have been a blowout. Bulldogs had opportunity to creep back in because Brisbane left that door open. We have seen inaccuracy cost Brisbane so many times, and they were just fortunate enough here, I feel, to have a big enough gap at 3/4 time that inaccuracy kind of didn't play into the Bulldogs' hand, which is unfortunate because Bulldogs fans are absolutely livid they lost this game. Breaking the score line down, it was Brisbane leading at quarter time, 2 goals 2-14 to 2 goals 1-13, one single point in it. At half time, Brisbane took a rather commanding lead given the circumstances of the game, 7-4-46 leading 5-3-33, 13 points the way of the Lions. At 3/4 time, as I said, I honestly thought the game was done and dusted. 10-11-71 was in front of 8-4-52. And the final score line saw Brisbane shift on to 12-14-86 against the Bulldogs 12-4-76. In that final term alone, the Lions went on to kick 2 goals 3 against the Bulldogs, 4 goals straight. They were coming and they were coming hard. And you can take that with as much sexual innuendo as you want. This is a team that we have seen really in last quarters, especially over the last couple of weeks, backed up against the ropes and come out swinging. They've got nothing to lose. Well, they've got everything to lose, really. They're fighting for a final spot, but they're backed up against the wall and they just come out throwing haymakers, and it's just unfortunate the last couple of weeks the Bulldogs have allowed too much of a commanding lead heading into that final term that it's been too hard to scrap back. We've seen them lose by a couple of kicks. It was at least by less than 2 goals against Adelaide the week prior, and they lose this game by less than 2 goals as well. So, very concerning, I feel, because again, this trend of losing to top 8 teams and teams above them continues, because we can't really take a team seriously if they can't be beating teams above them, especially if these teams are going to be the competing teams. Looking at the Bulldogs' run home, they only have 2 teams that they play in the next 5 games that aren't above them. So they play GWS and they play, or it's escaped me who they're playing, but I don't have them beating either team. I have them losing both of those, so they'll win, you know, the 3 out of the 5. I don't know whether that's going to be enough for them to play finals football. It's going to be an interesting watch. Brisbane, on the other hand, with this win and with some other outcomes in this round falling their way, have opportunity to seize number 1 seed on top of the ladder, given the fact that Collingwood were at 1 point, 2.5, almost 3 games clear, which is huge for them, because that would give them enough confidence in their own game, finishing first on the ladder within this, you know, premiership defence that they're mounting, to go back to back. And I really feel their best has all potential to be able to do so. I did say when Brisbane won the flag last year that they have potential to be the next dynasty team. They've got the list, and they just keep building on top of it. They make their list so much better. Have they struggled without Joe Danaher this year? Maybe, just a little bit. But I think they're going to find enough components, you know, through the next couple of years to still travel incredibly well without him. The only concern for Bulldogs out of this game, apart from the loss obviously, was the fact that Latham Vandermeer was off with an ankle injury, as well as James O'Donnell as well. So a little bit walking wounded out of that game. A small forward and a defender, so might see some opportunity come knocking depending on the severity of those injuries, but nothing else to really report out of this game at all. So we can happily move on to the votes for this game. And I feel I've done some players dirty. I really do. I mean, the Bulldogs lose by 10 points. Riley West kicks 4, and I can't justify giving him a vote. It's so hard. I mean, when it comes to talking about who I think was best on ground in these games, it's always going to be an objective decision. It is always going to be based upon my own opinion. You know, subjective also to different things. So if you agree with me, if you don't agree with me, it opens up conversation points in the comment section down below. Just go on down. Just head on down. Let's have a talk about it, because I know my thought process isn't going to be the same as your thought process at home. So let's talk about it. The 3 I landed on, though, I feel it's hard to argue against, especially the guy who I gave best on ground to, because I think he was a clear best on ground. The 1 vote I gave to Marcus Bontempelli. I just feel his game in the midfield, especially over the last 2 weeks, he has fought so hard to try and get this club over the line in both games. And as a neutral supporter, it breaks me to see such a prominent figure within the AFL, one of the best players in the comp, absolutely work his fucking ass off and get no result. It's painful. But Mr. Bontempelli had 24 disposals, 13 kicks and 11 handballs, 3 marks, 10 tackles, 4 clearances, 520 metres gained, 1 goal, and 4 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Will Ashcroft, and I'm going to make a very, very bold statement here. I think when it comes to brother combinations in the competition, the Dacos boys have the number 1 spot down pat. I think the Ashcroft boys have potential to be the best brother combination, just with the way they play the game. They both love winning contested ball. They're both absolute bulls around the contest. They know how to find the goals. That's not knocking the Dacos boys at all, because they are sublime. But I think the Ashcroft boys have potential to be in the same conversation, if not better. Bold? Maybe. But Will had 26 disposals rather, 15 kicks and 11 handballs, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 5 clearances, 372 metres gained, 3 goals and 5 score involvements. The 3 vote for me, and a player who I feel is severely underrated in the role he plays. His trade from the Bulldogs to Brisbane absolutely changed the dynamic of this midfield group at the Lions, and that is Josh Dunkley. He had 28 disposals, 12 kicks and 16 handballs, 2 marks, 15 tackles, 5 clearances, 230 metres gained, and 4 score involvements. The Bulldogs, at this point in time, are going to need to have everything fall their way to finish in the top 8. If they make it, I don't know whether they're going to be the threat that everybody thought they could be, which again, I think just speaks to the volume of the skill gap between the Bulldogs' best players and then the next tier underneath. Brisbane, however, finding a way to get job done, and inaccuracy could come and bite them in the arse in September, but while they're still stacking up wins here, you can't argue against the fact that their best is good enough to win them back-to-back flags. Saturday afternoon kicked off at the University of Tasmania Stadium with Hawthorn taking on Port Adelaide. And we all know the historied Hollywood and drama around these two teams of late. You had the stoush between Ken Hinkley and James Sicily post-game, Jack Ginnivan making comments about flying and everything else. And that truly came back to bite Ken Hinkley in the arse in this game, because not only did Hawthorn win, but the fact that Jack Ginnivan decided to break out the plane emote, doing his little fucking flying around after he kicked a goal, and then the fans getting up and doing it in Ken Hinkley's face when he came down to address the boys. Oh, bittersweet moment. I mean, they cut to Ken Hinkley in the coach's box, and he's laughing, he's having a good time. But I feel Ken Hinkley over recent weeks has not been taking his role too seriously as a coach. I know there's a lot of Port Adelaide fans that are very disgruntled with his demeanour. Was getting absolutely belted 2 weeks ago and was fucking around with lolly teeth in the fucking coach's box. In this game, they're getting beaten by almost 40 points. Jack Ginnivan goes and kicks a goal. Ken Hinkley's having a bit of a giggle. I mean, it's all in jest given the to and fro between the two. But you'd rather not see a coach laughing and fucking around and trying to have a good time when your team on the field is underperforming to expectation. I mean, the fall-off from Port Adelaide this year has been huge. I called it. I called it at the start of the year. I said when Zach Butters was injured, Port Adelaide were going to get off to a very slow start. I actually had Port Adelaide finishing 9th or 10th on the ladder overall. Not far off from expectation where they are right now. So if anything, I've gotten at least one fucking prediction right this year. Hawthorn took this win by 38 points, and they looked to be in a pretty strong position throughout this entire game, minus the fact that at quarter time the scores were deadlocked at 3-2, 20 apiece. After that, you had a real arm wrestle where Port Adelaide would get in front and then Hawthorn would stem the flow. At halftime, it was Hawthorn leading 6-4-40 to 4-3-27. Again, 13 points with the push and pull. Could have been anybody's game at that point. At three-quarter time, it was 8-6-54 the way of Hawthorn, leading 6-6-42. So again, still only 12 singular points, 2 goals in it, anybody's game. But as we have seen over the course of this year, those deadlock games come three-quarter time. There is always one team that pulls away and one team that just dies in the arse. And that was exactly what happened in this game, because it was Hawthorn finishing 13-9-87 to Port Adelaide 7-7-49. In reflection, Hawthorn moved on from 8-6 to 13-9 to end the game. They went on to kick 5 goals 3. Port Adelaide in the final quarter kicked 1 goal 1. So it was very one-sided. I feel Port Adelaide's biggest problem here, now you can talk about Connor Rozee missing off of halfback all you want. I don't think he would make much of a difference in this point. I feel the biggest tipping point for Port Adelaide this year has been a lack of forward presence. While we've seen Mitch Georgiades go to another level this year, we haven't had a combination of players kind of popping off. Whereas when we had Charlie Dixon in this lineup, he might not have been kicking bags every week, but he would drag the number one defender out. He would make a contest. It would allow for other players to get involved. When you don't have that big commanding presence, like Mitch Georgiades, as I said, he's doing incredibly well this year, but he's not that big commanding presence that Charlie Dixon was. And outside of Mitch Georgiades, we have had absolutely fuck all giving him help. We've had Willie Rioli in and out of the team, threatening to kill people, going and playing in the fucking sandful, whatever the fuck he does every other week. Lukosius has been out injured and has lacked with form. We haven't seen much of Todd Marshall this year. So it's a very haphazard kind of forward 50, and I feel that's where Port Adelaide have struggled the most. Horn Francis missing in the midfield, obviously a big out for them. But when you have a player like Jordan Sweet for Port Adelaide have a career best game against a ruckman in Lloyd Meek, who by many should be within an All-Australian conversation because he has been tremendous this year. I personally don't have him. Actually, I might have him in the top 5 ruckman, maybe just outside of it. But he has been absolutely solid for Hawthorn this year, and he has been, when it comes to matchups, very hard to match up against because of the way he plays. But Jordan Sweet played so well that it was hard to look past him when it came to handing out votes for this game. And many think that he actually finished best on ground given the score gap. I can't justify it. I just feel the players I landed on for the 2 and the 3 vote in this game were very influential on outcome. But Jordan Sweet, let me run through the stats this man had. This is a guy who got brought over to Port Adelaide from the Bulldogs looking for opportunity, didn't want to be second fiddle to Tim English. Unfortunately, Ivan Soldo gets traded from Richmond to Port Adelaide, and Sweet becomes second fiddle to Soldo. But I think after this performance, if Port Adelaide have not identified this man needs to be your number 1 ruck, there is something in the waters in South Australia I don't understand. He had 22 disposals, 13 kicks and 9 handballs. He took the 1 mark. He laid 7 tackles, 42 hitouts, 10 clearances, 451 metres gained, 1 goal and 3 score involvements, 7 tackles, 42 hitouts, 10 clearances, 22 disposals. Some of these stats that he laid weren't just game high, but this was career high for him. This was the best game of AFL football this guy has ever played, and it was the perfect time to display what he's got, because if he's still on the out at Port Adelaide and there's another club looking to maybe poach a ruckman to build around, Jordan Sweet could be the guy. I'm not sure how old the bloke is. That's something I didn't really invest time into, but he's one worth watching. He had an absolutely stellar performance. He was overshadowed, however, by 2 men from Hawthorn, the first of which I've given 2 votes to, and that was Jarman Impey. He had 26 disposals, 18 kicks and 8 handballs, 5 marks, 5 tackles, 459 metres gained, 3 goals and 7 score involvements. And it was Dylan Moore who I gave best on ground to. This is a guy who has been a shadow of his former All-Australian self this year, but he got back to his best on Saturday afternoon. He had 32 disposals, 25 kicks and 7 handballs, 2 marks, 9 tackles, 6 clearances, 523 metres gained, 2 goals, and 7 score involvements. I don't think there is anything else to report out of this game on a negative aspect. I will quickly do so now just to make sure that we aren't skimming over anything important. No injuries were named. Nothing else really to talk about. It's just really peculiar to see how these teams have performed this year, because we've got a Port Adelaide outfit that many people would have expected to play finals that has been absolutely nowhere near it this year, and Hawthorn, many expected to be the premiership winning team this year. They went into the season as premiership favourites, just ahead of Carlton. We know how bad Carlton have gone this year. Hawthorn have been incredibly inconsistent in part, and it's not going to cost them a top 8 spot, because I feel they're going to play finals this year, but they're going to miss that crucial top 4 finish that they very well should have had their hands wrapped around, because this list, solidified with the defense they now have, should be performing a hell of a lot better than some of the outcomes that we have had this year. But Hockball, well and truly in flight. Ken, go and get fucked. We leave Tasmania behind and we shift up to New South Wales. Sydney is where it was at. The SCG playing host to Sydney, taking on North Melbourne. Luke Davies-Uniacke returning to this game for North, but they are without who has just been proven, in my opinion, to be North Melbourne's most critical player, and that is Tristan Cherry. The gap between him and then the next best ruckman for North Melbourne is so fucking incredibly large that it is not funny. I mean, we were just talking about Jordan Sweet being on the out. He might not like playing second fiddle to another ruckman, but that's the type of player a North Melbourne should look at, because they need some solid backup in case this man goes down for swinging a forearm and copping 3 weeks, or he goes down injured, because the glaring omission of this man from North Melbourne's midfield allowed for players, 3 in particular, to get absolutely off the fucking chain in this game. And while I will commend North Melbourne for a 3-quarter effort to really take it to Sydney, it was one of those games yet again that we have seen dished up from North Melbourne many times this year. 3 quarters of effort, blown out in the final term. And it's unfortunate. Coming from a Richmond man, I've seen those blowouts happen with Richmond many times, not just this year, but last year as well. So I understand the sentiment, I know how bad it feels. But again, North Melbourne supporters can hang their hat on the fact that even without Tristan Cherry, they stuck with Sydney for 3 quarters of football. The scoreline will break that down and show how evident that was. Quarter time, Sydney led by a singular goal, 3-3-21, leading 2-3-15. At halftime, it was Sydney leading 7-5-47 to 4-5-29. Only 3 goals a gap. That could be closed. I mean, they're missing Nick Larkey, so it starts to become a little bit problematic. But they can find a way. They've got avenues to score. At 3-quarter time, it was Sydney 7-9-51, leading 5-9-39. Very inaccurate quarter from both teams, with Sydney registering only the 4 behinds for the quarter, with North Melbourne kicking 1 goal for the quarter as well. And the final term saw Sydney blow out to 12-12-84, defeating North Melbourne 7-11-53. That final term seeing Sydney kick 5 goals 3, and North Melbourne going on to kick only 2 goals 2 for the rest of the game. Again, with not having a commanding presence like Nick Larkey in their forward 50, they struggled to hit the scoreboard. Without Tristan Cherry in the ruck, they were absolutely towed up. I mean, at half-time, Brodie Grundy was set to obliterate the hit-out stat, the record, which I think is at 80, something around there, for hitouts in a game. I believe Todd Goldstein holds that record. He had 50 hitouts at halftime, maybe just a little bit over, and it looked like he was going to absolutely squash it. I think he finished on something like 65, 66 hitouts. We'll get to it in the votes because Brodie Grundy is in that conversation yet again, let me tell you. But he was able to get first hand to the ball. He was feeding the midfielders something crazy. The amount of hit outs to advantage that he was just dropping on Isaac Heaney's chest was absolutely incredible. Max Gawn is the one ruckman everyone's talking about for All-Australian. Brodie Grundy has to be in the conversation now. The past 2 months, he has without a doubt been the best ruckman in the competition. And I know we have to look at a full scope of the season. 2 months is only 8, rounds of football. We've played 19 rounds, so who has been the best for that 11? I would argue Tristan Cherry has been more consistent this year than Max Gawn, but that's probably an opinion that's going to have knives to my throat and I'm going to get dragged out the back and hung. But it is a very interesting watch because I think Brodie Grundy at this point in time is the number 1 ruckman in the competition. Don't think that's a huge call either. I think there will be plenty that agree with me. I don't think there was injuries out of this game. I will check. I need to start checking this just before we start recording just to make sure. It's the one stat I never write down. Callum Coleman-Jones finished the game injured at quarter time, so he was he was substituted out for young Zach Banch, who actually didn't play that bad of a game on debut. But again, given the scoreline, the 3 players that I've gone for the votes here, you can't argue against. They were the 3 best on comfortably, and the stats back it up. These are 3 players that are synonymous with Sydney when Sydney perform well, I feel. The 1 vote I gave to Chad Warner, I thought he was absolutely incredible with the disposal he had. He had 26 of them, 11 kicks and 15 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 4 clearances, 426 metres gained, 1 goal, and almost a game-high 10 score involvements. There's only 1 player that had 1 more than he did. But 10 score involvements from 26 disposals is huge. You're getting off more often than not. Almost half of your disposals are ending up in some sort of score. So he was very influential on this game. The 2 vote I gave to Brodie Grundy. He had 22 disposals, 10 kicks and 12 handballs, 2 marks, 3 tackles, 62 hit-outs, 11 clearances, 139 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. But it was Isaac Heaney who recaptured the form he had at the start of last year when everybody thought he was going to run home with the Brownlow quite convincingly. He had 34 disposals, 22 kicks and 12 handballs, 8 marks, 5 tackles, 13 clearances, 584 metres gained, 5 goals, and 11 score involvements. They were talking during the game about the game he was playing, and the only Sydney player prior to Heaney that had as big of a game as he had stat-wise was Paul Kelly. You've got to go a ways back. That is some good company to be in. Isaac Heaney could not be stopped. The duo of Grundy just tapping it down the throat of Heaney, and Heaney either hitting someone up in forward 50 or kicking the goal himself, it was pretty much the game off of his own boot, really. He was so so far and beyond the best player on field. Brodie Grundy had a great game, but Isaac Heaney, very well, probably the best performance by any player over the course of the competition for the entire weekend. It was huge. It was big. And Sydney winning this game keep their mathematical chances of finishing in the top 8 alive. Very much in the same boat as the Western Bulldogs. They need everything to fall their way. But with how they're playing right now, I am going to go out on a limb. This could get me dragged, but I think Sydney have more momentum behind them. I've got more belief in Sydney having shit go their way and making the top 8 than I do the Bulldogs. Big call? Probably so, but Sydney, fuck, they look good on the weekend. We shift on down to the MCG, where Carlton hosted Melbourne. This was a game that I feel if you were only a Carlton and a Melbourne fan, you were genuinely interested in, because these are two clubs that have severely let their supporter bases down in 2025. I think the biggest underperforming team, the biggest rabble of a club this year has been Carlton, given the expectation of having a premiership in one hand, being a premiership favourite, to be only, I think at this point in time of the year, 2 games clear of Richmond, and Richmond were predicted to not win a game, and Richmond beat Carlton in round 1. Huge, absolutely huge. They have fallen short of their own markers, let alone the markers that supporters set for them, astronomically. And Melbourne, we all know that pre-season they had the off-field drama, the shit that just stemmed into this year. I think that internally has ruined this club. They maintain that there is no issues within the club, and, they're happy to move forward, but I feel there needs to be a deep dive into some shit, because I definitely feel from an external point of view looking inwards, there is some shit going down that they don't either want to talk about, or they're happy to just keep fucking shoveling under the rug. Just a little bit. But it was Carlton breaking a loss streak and actually winning themselves a game of football. And I hate to admit it, I've been jumping on his fucking back for weeks, but Charlie Curnow, very influential in this game, given the fact that with only a few moments left on the clock, he goes back and kicks the game that essentially seals the win. Before that goal, could have been anybody's game. Clayton Oliver's 200th was absolutely soured by the fact that Melbourne very well could have and should have won this game. They lose by 8. Inaccuracy in the second half absolutely killed them. They only needed to convert 2 of the misses they had, and they had 7 of them. So, you know what I mean? It's again a team that is going to be ruining their ball usage forward half, and that was with Cozzy Pickett popping up and kicking 5 in this game as well. An absolutely sensational game from him. I still feel the contract he just signed doesn't justify what he has done as a player up until this point in time. I think he is paying well overs right now, but he was great. He had a great game. I thought he was best on, just quietly. But yeah, Melbourne. Oh boy, they're not going to be looking at this game lightly, especially given I thought Max Gawn would have had ruck ascendancy. I don't feel he really did. They're going to be without Stephen May potentially for a few weeks. Now, I want to talk about that real quick. There was a contest between him and it may have been Fogarty. I'm not 100% certain, but essentially, Stephen May's shoulder, I'm talking about the ball joint, I'm talking the tip of the bastard, made contact with the head of the Carlton player. It's busted his nose wide open, blood pissing out everywhere. Nobody really remonstrated with Stephen May. Some idiots on Twitter tried telling me they did, but the footage shows otherwise. I mean, Stephen May even went over to make sure he was okay after the fact. No player really rushed over to say, what the fuck are you doing, get stuck into him. I feel there is every possibility that this is going to get thrown out at the tribunal, and that's not going to sit well with people, especially with the Tristan Cherry incident, where I still feel he was trying to hit the ball. It was accidental contact. He copped 3 weeks. With Stephen May, he does leave the ground just a little bit. He does hit him with the ball joint of the shoulder, but the figuration of his arms, where his hands are at, it looks like he's almost jumping up, hoping that the ball's about to bounce up into his hands and he's about to take it, and he kind of semi-braces for a little bit of body contact while he's grabbing the ball. He's hoping it's going to be shoulder to shoulder. He's going to take possession, knock the player, and he's going to run off with it. I think given the fact that we saw, I can't think of his name, it's escaped me. Was it Alex Pearce earlier this year for Fremantle get done for something similar, and he had his case thrown out in the end? I think there's scope where that happens for Stephen May. And I don't say that lightly, because it did cause what looked like a rather severe injury. It could just be that, Carlton player's a bleeder and he copped a bit of a knock and he started bleeding. I don't know the semantics behind it all, but some people, like David King, calling for 6 weeks and calling for his season to be over, I think is a little bit over exuberant. I think it's fucking bullshit. It's going to be an interesting watch. Keep your eyes out on the tribunal hearing, I suppose, because it has been, referred straight to the tribunal. So when it does so, I believe it's going to be a minimum of 3 to 4 weeks. They might be trying to argue for more here. I'm not entirely sure, but that was rather damning. That came at a very pivotal point, especially given later on in the game Stephen May ended up off the field with an injury of his own. I got to really quickly check that out just to make sure what that injury was. I'm not sure whether it was concussion. I need to check. It could very well be. It was Stephen May with concussion. So he's going... It was Francis Evans that got hit. It wasn't Fogarty, it was Evans. So Evans, obviously, he's going to miss next week with concussion because of that hit. Stephen May ends up getting concussed in the very same game. So regardless of whether he has his suspension overturned or not, he's not playing next week. Very interesting watch for that in particular moving forward. But it was all the way of Carlton, unfortunately, this game. I thought Melbourne would be a little bit more competitive here. They just really didn't capitalise on opportunities forward half of the ball. Carlton just looked a little bit more cohesive, and they did so for majority of the game. At quarter time, they led 4-2-26 to 3 straight 18. At half time, it was Carlton 6-4-40 leading Melbourne 3-3-21. Melbourne only managing 3 behinds for the quarter. At three-quarter time, despite Melbourne hitting the front during this term early, it was Carlton 9-5-59 leading 7-7-49, 10 points. And then we saw Carlton blow out to a big lead, and then Melbourne wrestled it all the way back to 2 points, and then it was that goal from Curnow at the end, getting them over the line by 8, with Carlton finishing 12-6-78 to 10-10-70. In the second half, Carlton kicked 6 goals 2, and Melbourne went on to kick 7 goals 7. So as I said, they only need to kick 2 of those in order to win the game. Unfortunately, inaccuracy crept in. I want to see who the culprits were. We love doing this. We love doing this live. Who were the culprits for Melbourne here? Cozzy Pickett kicked 2 behinds. Okay, maybe you can forgive that considering he kicked 5 goals straight. Van Rooyen kicked a behind. Max kicked a behind. Fritsch kicked a behind. Caleb Windsor. So they didn't actually have many, like Colton Tholstrup, Daniel Turner, these type of players that like hitting the scoreboard sometimes didn't kick any. Petrarca didn't kick a score. Melksham only kicked 1 goal in weeks where he's been absolutely toweling teams up. I thought he would have had 4 on him. Ashton Moyer for Carlton kicked 4, just to give you a scope of the scoring in this game. Absolutely gobsmacked by some players for Melbourne, just some weeks performing out of their skin, and then other weeks, against clubs where they could have taken advantage. I mean, the back line of Carlton is set up in a way where a player like Melksham can get some space and find dominance in that forward 50, because he can have enough movement with all of the players around him to break away from a Wiedering. But unfortunately, it just did not happen, and Carlton managed to just stem the flow, calm things down, and keep control, which is something that we have seen them struggle with this year, and surprisingly, didn't let it happen in this game. For the votes, though, as I said, I do feel Cozzy Pickett was best on. We will get to that momentarily. I have given the 1 vote ahead of Ashton Moyer, who kicked 4. I've given it to Charlie Curnow purely based on the fact that not only did he kick the goal that sealed the game, but I've been so harsh on this guy for weeks, commenting on his inaccuracy, his inability to hit the scoreboard. In a game where he really needed to stand tall, kicking 3 and essentially the match winner is good enough for me to get the 1 vote. He had 15 disposals, which were just 15 kicks straight, 8 marks, 1 tackle, 1 clearance, 351 metres gained, 3 goals, and the 5 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Patrick Cripps. Very well might be the first set of votes I've given him all year, because he has been nowhere near as good as he was last year when he won the Brownlow, and I'm still very much saying that he did not have a year last year that was deserving of the amount of votes he got. There is no way known he was that much better than anybody in the competition, let alone to be able to set a new record for the Brownlow votes given. But in this game, he held his own and he played a very pivotal role in ensuring Carlton got this win. He had 29 disposals, 17 kicks and 12 handballs, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 8 clearances, 415 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. However, it was Kozzy Pickett, best on for me, justifying means to an end, I suppose, and trying to show that he might be worth some of the money he's been given in this huge contract he just signed. But he had 23 disposals, 19 kicks and 4 handballs, 3 marks, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 449 metres gained, 5 goals, and 11 score involvements. Almost half of what he touched ended up in Melbourne scoring in some capacity. He has the ability to be a match winner for Melbourne. It's just, for me, the inconsistencies of his game let him down so much. There just comes a period of time with Kozzy Pickett where he's bound to do something stupid that's going to see him suspended for weeks. Thankfully this year, he's actually had his head screwed on quite tight and he's had a very solid season. I'd very much argue it could be an All-Australian contention this year in a small forward kind of role, because there's not many players in his role in that capacity that are doing it as well as he's doing it this season. So he gets the 3 from me, but Carlton pick up the win here, and I feel while Carlton are going to miss the top 8, they're not going to play finals, they have a run home that could help dictate the shape of how the ladder forms. And it's very interesting to see how these teams kind of perform when they've got power in the palm of their hands, and things are going to be able to move certain ways. It's going to be a very interesting watch. See, I'm stumbling and bumbling. That's how fucking flabbergasted I am by this outcome, because I honestly thought Melbourne would have had them dead to rights. But unfortunately, a little bit of a salt in the wound, because for me and my tipping this past weekend, this was the first incorrect tip I had, and it soured me quite severely, because I thought I was going to have another perfect week or near enough to it, and unfortunately these Carlton bastards decided to rock up and play some football. So I bet you there would have been some bins set on fire, some houses got robbed, I don't know, Carlton fans would have been popping off and celebrating somehow, I'm sure of it. The final game on Saturday night saw us head over to Perth, Optus Stadium, West Coast hosting Richmond. In my eyes, this was probably one of the only games left for the remainder of the season that could have potentially opened up a winning avenue for West Coast. Very similar to Richmond. I feel there are 2 more games before the end of the year that are very winnable for Richmond, but this game had to be a must-get. I felt the game that we played against them at the MCG, falling incredibly close as it did, gave me hope that we could win this one, at least in a tight contest. I made a call in my tipping video saying that either West Coast were going to flog us or we would win a close contest. I did not expect to have the influential win that Richmond picked up in this game. It was a hard-fought contest up until half-time, but the third quarter performance from Richmond has been the best individual quarter performance I've seen from Richmond in over 2 years. This was a sensational turnaround by Richmond, and it gives me hope that we are on a fast track to this rebuild. There's been a lot of conjecture around where Richmond and West Coast are at with this current rebuild. I may very well throw up some screenshots right now of an argument that went down over on Twitter or X, whatever you call it. Myself, as a passionate Richmond supporter, got into it with a passionate West Coast supporter, and he believes that Richmond has been carried by senior talent and that West Coast youth trumps Richmond's youth, and that West Coast are well ahead on their rebuild comparatively to Richmond. But when Richmond travel to Perth and they manage to walk away with a 49-point win, it is the biggest winning margin under Adam Uze. It is the first time under Adam Uze we have cracked 100 points as his final score. This all points the way of Richmond being on a much better and faster track on the rebuild than the West Coast Eagles. And again, a very good friend of mine is a very avid West Coast supporter. He will tell you how it is. He'll tell you which West Coast players are fucking with his head and need to be dropped and what moves they need to make. He's not scared to throw West Coast players under the bus. He said emphatically after this game that Richmond are miles ahead in the rebuild, and this game was indication to that. And as a Richmond man, that just brings so much pride to myself, because there is still a lot of young talent that isn't in this team due to injury, or they haven't debuted yet. They're still building some tanks up. Very excited about Richmond right now. Can you tell? I'm fucking stoked. The scoreline Saw Richmond lead by 5 points at quarter time, 3-2-20 to 2-3-15. At half time, it was Richmond by 9 points, 6-3-39 to 4-6-30. The three-quarter scoreline, this performance in the third term was sensational. It was Richmond leading 14-7-91 to 5-8-38. And the final scoreline was 16-9-105, defeating 8-8-56. In that third quarter alone, to come out and kick 8 goals, 4 was huge. And then obviously a little bit of a drop-off because we only managed to kick 2 goals, 2 in the final term. We've seen that drop-off happen with Richmond, and thankfully we just had a huge lead, and that was never going to be harmed in any way, shape or form. I still feel there were some kids for West Coast that stood tall in this game. I thought Harley Reid in the second half was great. I thought Jack Ross in a tagging role on Harley Reid played exceptionally well. We saw a similar tagging role the week prior against Essendon, where Zach Merritt found a lot of ascendancy in the first half. Jack Ross went to him in the second half and completely shut him down. I think we might have found a new role for Jack Ross. If Uze wants to start rolling a hard tag, Jack Ross has now proven he's the man that can do it. But the second half of Reid was great. They threw him forward to break the tag. It worked. He kicked a couple of goals. He was still finding plenty of the ball. I thought Ruben Jinby off of half back was absolutely sensational. I really rate him as a player. Outside of that, though, not many real big individual performances. I mean, there was a West Coast supporter banging on about how great Jack Williams is as a forward. Up until the three-quarter time when he got subbed out, he had one pressure act. That's all he did for 3 quarters of football. It just shows how well drilled Richmond's back six were. Tyler Young, sensational. Not many people talk about him. Same with Ben Miller. Not many people talk about him, but they are so underrated in a young key defender stat. These two guys are going to be huge for Richmond moving forward. The only sour note to this game was Seth Campbell late getting concussed. He misses the game against Collingwood this week, which is huge because Seth Campbell brings a lot of X factor to our forward half. As much as this win was great, I'm lost for words. I'm just so stoked. We saw one of the best tackles in years go down. Maurice Rioli from inside our forward 50, sprinting as fast as he fucking can to drop Brady Huff at the half forward line for West Coast. This bastard ran almost 150 metres on a hard sprint. Superman. He dove, arms out, grabs the back of the jumper, pulls him down. It trumps the Tom Brown tackle that we saw earlier in the year to secure the win against West Coast, because not only did this tackle 150 metres away, it set the tone for pressure. We scored a goal off of that pressure. There were a couple of other goals in the game where Maurice Rioli smothers a ball, then picks the ball up, kicks it to Nankervis, kicks it from the goal square. It's some individual performances really stood out to me. Maurice Rioli was huge. The boys I mentioned in defence were huge. Tyler Sonzi cracks the shits the prior week against Essendon because he gets subbed out of the game. Was within Richmond's best in this game. Answered the critics very well, including myself. Man, I'm just so stoked. My club was a club that was set to not win a game this year by many. Mark Bickley and Kane Corn said we would win less than 3 games, and everybody was coming up against us saying that this rebuild's going to be so tough for us and we're in for a world of hurt. And yet here we are on the ladder, and we'll see it in a few moments' time. We're only a few wins behind some teams that should be playing finals football. And when you look at the fact that we lost games earlier this year to North Melbourne, Melbourne and GWS, which were all winnable, we could be sitting right now on 8 wins. And if the next 2 wins that I feel we in the conversation are getting are gettable, and we win those, there's a universe where Richmond win 10 games this year. That's huge to me. Like, we're not having Sam Lawler out there right now with hamstring. Josh Smiley still yet to debut. No Noah Bolter, because this was a night game, so he hasn't been able to play the last 2 weeks because of his curfew. So we've still got players to come into circulation here. And Tom Lynch out injured. Makaiti Lafau out injured. We've got players to come back. We're only going to get better. This is the point I'm trying to say. Richmond's rebuild is going to be potentially one of the quickest we have seen in recent years. We've been able to rebuild on the fly quicker than most would have thought. I actually probably think within the next 2 to 3 years, it is very possible that Richmond are back in a top 8 conversation and playing finals again. Am I going a little bit early crow? I don't know. I just feel that's the trajectory we're now setting ourselves. I'm very excited as a Richmond man. For the votes, I landed on 3 players. The one vote I circulated in and out so much, I actually had Tyler Sonsie in here at one point. I had Jack Ross in here at one point, but I landed on Nick Vlaston, who I thought was very critical in defence. Some may laugh at me, but I feel Nick Vlaston should be in All-Australian contention this year. A lot of people are talking about Harris Andrews. I don't think Harris Andrews has been the best fullback this year. I think a player like Darcy Moore, Jacob Wiedering, Sam Taylor, those could be players that you throw at fullback. Nick Vlaston, in my opinion, trying to take Richmond bias out of this as much as I can, but I think the stats speak for themselves. Nick Vlaston should be All-Australian centre-half back this year, because Richmond could be getting blown out by 10-plus goals every week if it wasn't for the efforts off of this man's shoulders. I'm telling you now, this guy, criminal that he has not been All-Australian at all in his career this year. At all. See, I'm so flustered. I'm so flustered, but he gets the one vote from me. 25 disposals, 18 kicks, 7 handballs, 11 marks, 1 tackle, 1 clearance, 434 metres gained, and 2 score involvements. Obviously, playing at centre-half back, you're not going to get many score involvements, but 11 marks, most of those, coming from intercepts and just the way he carries himself in that defensive half. Such a good player. I think I might cry when he retires. I cried when Dusty retired. I think I'm going to get the same amount of tears when Nick Vlaston retires as well, because he's forever been one of my favourite Tigers. The 2 vote I gave to Jacob Hopper. Really feel this year he has started to prove a lot of Richmond supporters wrong, because a lot of people saying we shouldn't have gotten Tim Taranto and Hopper. They're the same type of player. I agree with that. They are. I don't think we should be playing both of these men in the midfield at the same time. I think a forward rotation could work better. But Jacob Hopper has answered the critics this year, and I feel it's been his best run since coming over to Tigerland. He had 33 disposals, 13 kicks and 20 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 8 clearances, 42 metres gained rather, not 22, and 2 goals. I didn't get his score involvements. That is bad. Look, on my part, let's do that live, shall we? Let's get the score involvements up for him. Jacob Hopper had himself 6 score involvements for the game, which, again, just adds a string to his bow. He's not known since coming to Tigerland for being a goal kicker, but he's done so in recent weeks, and it's good to start getting some goal scores generated from our midfield, because I feel with our forward line being as young and inexperienced as it has been, some of these senior midfielders standing up and being able to hit the scoreboard helps us so much. And for anyone who wants to say that Tim Taranto and Jacob Hopper have been carrying us as senior players, they're only like 27 years old. They're like mid-20s, so they're still very much in this rebuild. They still have 6-7 years that they can attribute to this team. So as far as the rebuild goes, these guys can keep carrying us as long as they fucking want, because when they're putting out these numbers, they're hitting the scoreboard and they're hitting up players and they're bringing players into the game. It's give me more Hopper and Taranto. That's all I'm saying. 3 votes did go to Tim Taranto. I thought he was best on. He was voted best on by the Richmond supporters for the game as a whole. He had 30 disposals, 15 kicks, 15 handballs, 5 marks, 4 tackles, 7 clearances, 425 metres gained, 3 goals, and a game-high 9 score involvements. I've rambled on too much about my boys, so much so that I'm feeling a little bit delirious. I'm getting a little bit muddled, but Richmond picking up their 5th win of the season. I'm absolutely stoked, absolutely elated. I am deflated a bit that Seth Campbell will not play this coming week due to concussion, but West Coast, boy, conversation now points to people suggesting they need to get a priority pick. They need to get some package assistance. I feel there shouldn't be. I mean, North Melbourne have gotten it for like 6 years, and I feel they shouldn't have gotten it. I feel West Coast, we saw them win a premiership, might have been 2018 that they won it, but it's still within the last, 8 years that they've gone and won it, like 5 years, 6 years, whatever the case. They won a premiership within a certain time frame. Like, they got hit hard by COVID, don't get me wrong, but this is a team that has won a premiership ahead of, like, GWS, has won a premiership ahead of Fremantle. They won a premiership ahead, they beat Collingwood for the premiership. I mean, come the fuck on. They won a premiership ahead of Brisbane, and yet all these clubs I've just mentioned have better list management ahead of them, and I feel that's what holds them in better stead. So West Coast in their off-season this year, that number 1 pick, really feel they need to trade that to another club and split it to another couple, because they're in all sorts and they need to start doing something, otherwise they're going to be bottom dwelling for longer than I think most people anticipate. Now that we've spoken about Richmond, maybe I'll be a little bit less delirious moving forward. 3 games of football to go. All of them went down on Sunday, the first of which kicked off at GMHBA Stadium with Geelong hosting St Kilda in a game that was dead at halftime, well, quarter time even. It was actually, it was dead at quarter time, let's say that. St Kilda came back a little bit at halftime, but again, it was a game where I feel the scoreboard didn't reflect the amount of momentum and control that Geelong had on this game. I didn't feel at any point in time that this lead would slip into St Kilda's hands at all. Quarter time, it was 6 goals straight, 36, leading 2-2-14. At halftime, it was 10-2-62, leading 7-5 47. That effort in the second term from St Kilda was undone in the effort and lack thereof in the second half, because it was an absolute blowout after that point. Geelong at 3/4 time saw 15-8-98, leading 9-7-61, and then final score line was 17-11 113, defeating St Kilda 12-10 82. In the second half, St Kilda kicked 5 goals 5. Geelong went on to kick 7 goals 9. This could have been and should have been a hell of a lot bigger of a margin. It should have popped off a lot bigger than it did. This is a game, however, in one of those rare occasions that despite the 31-point lead and the 31-point win that they walk away with, I'm giving best on ground to a losing opponent. It's outrageous, I know, right? But this has caused more controversy as well, probably jumping the gun a little bit here. I thought best on ground was Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, and there's now a conversation about how much money he should be paid. Some people are saying he's the best player in the competition, or at least should be in the conversation. I still feel for all the good he does, he's still very rough around the edges in some aspects that truly sets him apart from the better players in the competition and where he's at now. There's some games this year where he has had clangers that have directly resulted to goals. There was one game, I think, where he had 10 clangers and 7 of those ended up in direct scores to the opponents. So gets plenty of the ball, looks polished when he does hit a target. He looks absolutely sensational, but I think people are kind of overriding the bad with how good he does. There is still a lot of bad to his game, and there's a lot that he can build on. But in the same token, that's a good thing, I think, as well, because that just shows how scary good he can be once he fixes that part of his game. The question now remains, does he stay at St Kilda? Does he go back to South Australia and end up at Port Adelaide or Adelaide? I mean, he's got the links with some good friends at Port Adelaide, or he can go to Adelaide, where they're in a window right now where they're contending for premierships. And I feel he fits Adelaide's mould more than what Port Adelaide does. I don't know. I don't think he stays at St Kilda. It would be detrimental to him to stay there, because while Ross the Boss is their coach, I don't think they're going anywhere. They're not competing for finals under Ross the Boss. He's too defensively sound. He is one note with his game style. It's not helping St Kilda at all. And I have discussion points many times with St Kilda supporters in the chat, when it comes to the comments of these videos. I don't think Ross the Boss is the man for you guys. I really don't. I think it's time now that they look to cutting ties and moving forward so they can have some view in sight of something being a little bit different. I believe Corey Enright is maybe next in line as a defender. That scares me, because it could be a more defensive style game, but it would be something different. It'd be something fresh, hopefully something that could bring a winning culture to St Kilda, because they themselves, I feel, have been a letdown this year. They could very well be playing finals with this list, and I feel they're under-delivering because of the style of gameplay they're playing. You can only notch that up to how they're coached, unfortunately. When it comes to this game, again, I have not done any research into injuries, so we are doing that live. The beauty of recording videos, right? I'm not sure whether there was. No. There was an injury to Tom Stewart, which is now being listed as to be confirmed. He was replaced in the third quarter. Interesting watch there, because Tom Stewart is very influential to that back half. I don't know whether that was because they had a commanding lead and they've just subbed him off. It says here, Guncat subbed out with potential knee knock. Geelong decides to sub Tom Stewart out of the game after the star defender appears to pull up sore following a strong intercept mark. I think they've just subbed him off to keep him on cotton wool, and there's no injury at all. We know how fucking Scott works when it comes to subs and pulling players out late and everything else in the fucking mix. When it comes to the inaccuracy in this game, because I feel Geelong should have absolutely belted St Kilda here. I want to see who contributed to those misses. Sean Manor kicked 3 behinds. Brad Close kicked 2. Shannon Neal only kicked 1 behind for the game. That's surprising. Dangerfield kicked it behind. Jeremy Cameron kicked it behind. Blixavs kicked it behind. But Geelong still locking away a top 4 spot, and I feel very much so Geelong are one of those teams that are just going to find themselves in the grand final this year. They're just well drilled from back to forward. They are comprehensively one of the best teams in the comp this year, and they just keep finding a way to build on top of it. And, you know, they shut down Bailey Smith in this game with the Marcus Windhager tag, but other players find ascendancy, and this is what's great about Geelong. They just target the right players, and they're given farmland and cotton on deals and everything else to get there, and they skim the salary cap, whatever the fuck they're doing, but they find ways to get it done. For the votes in this game, I think it was pretty straightforward. There were a couple of players that probably a little bit stiff. I mean, Jack Steele comes out and lays another fucking monster amount of tackles. I think he had like 11 or 12 tackles again. But the 3 here, comprehensively looking at the list that I've made, I think they are the best 3. They probably all find themselves in my team of the week as well, just given how they played. I gave 1 vote to Jeremy Cameron. He had 14 disposals, 11 kicks and 3 handballs, 4 marks, 1 tackle, 342 metres gained, 5 goals and 8 score involvements. Pretty sure at this point in time the Coleman is all but his. I don't think anybody's going to beat him. I don't know what the race looks like. I might actually bring that up later on in the video, just have a little look at it, if not now, if it hasn't appeared on screen. But yeah, I said at the start of the year I thought that he would win the Coleman, and that was a pretty good call. I thought he might struggle a little bit without Tom Hawkins, but he's just gone to a different level without him. It's very interesting. And Shannon Neal slowly starting to get some tutelage under him as well. He's going to be somewhat of a player too. The 2 vote I gave to Sean Manor, one of the better games I've seen him play for Geelong. He had 24 disposals, 15 kicks and 9 handballs, 6 marks, 11 tackles, 2 clearances, 498 metres gained, 3 goals and 8 score involvements. But as I said, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, he was who I thought was best on ground. He looked very polished when he was hitting targets. Still a few that he's missing, but he can build upon that. He had 36 disposals, 26 kicks and 10 handballs, 8 marks, 4 tackles, 10 clearances, 642 metres gained, 2 goals and 9 score involvements. Here's where I sit with St Kilda and them moving forward. Can't speak any more highly of Geelong. We know where Geelong are going. St Kilda need to do 2 things in the off-season this year. I feel they need to either move Ross Lyon on as coach, or at least identify a successor to him, so then we know moving forward they are going to change, because I don't think he's the man. And I feel instead of chasing every other player that they're throwing all this big money at, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira is the one they need to lock down long term. As I said, still very scrappy with some ball in hand. There are some other players in his role across the competition that I think have been more consistent this year, and some people might feel I'm rubbing them the wrong way. Again, just my opinion. Feel free to discuss with me down below. But a player of his talent can't be overlooked, and you can't afford to have an Adelaide or a Port Adelaide just come in and swoop him up and take him away from your club when he is a player that you can build such a key kind of thing around. He can be a key core component for you. And I feel, big call here, his position is on ball. Shouldn't be off of halfback, because in the midfield, when he's getting the ball tapped down to him and he's got that clean ability with ball in hand, when he is on, he's damaging. He needs to be around the centre contest. That's just my call. Agree or disagree? Let me know. The second last game of the round saw Collingwood hosting Fremantle at the MCG, and saw Fremantle in the end pull a Collingwood. We saw a comeback in the final quarter that was very Collingwood-like and is very Collingwood-coded, and Fremantle walk away with a 1-point win. Now, I saw something very interesting on social media, and they showed that in history, in this particular round, there are many times that they defeated their opponent by 1 point. That blows my mind that statistic is something that can carry on. I think over the last 6 years, it is now the 5th time that maybe in this round that they've won by a point. I'll have to fact check that, but this was huge for Fremantle, because not only has Collingwood now lost 2 games in a row to contending finals teams, Fremantle get a little bit of belief in themselves because they've knocked off the best in the competition. And if that doesn't give you enough confidence and momentum within your own systems to know that you can challenge the best and beat the best, I do not know what will. The scoreline saw Fremantle leading at quarter time 4-2-26 to 3-2-20. At half time, Collingwood stemmed the flow and got the lead back, leading 8-6-54 to 7-5-47. At three-quarter time, Collingwood led 9-8-62 to 8-5-53. They jumped out to a solid, sizable lead during that final term that I thought the game was done and dusted and they could not get back into this game, Fremantle. And in the end, it was Collingwood 11-12-78, defeated by Fremantle's 12-7-79. Again, inaccuracy creeping into the game. Considering Fremantle only kicked 2 behinds in the second half, Collingwood went on to kick 6, and they lose by a point. This is where we get to turn live to the player stats, and we get to point out the naysayers, the people that were a little bit wayward in front of goal. Brody Mychek kicks 3 behinds. Jamie Elliott kicks 2 behinds. Shea Bolton on the other side for Fremantle only kicked 3 behinds. Daniel McStay only kicked a behind for the game. Bo McCreary only kicks a behind for the game. Patrick Lipinski only kicks a behind for the game. Mason Cox only kicks a behind for the game. A lot of players on that Collingwood list there that would and should kick goals every other week, but were a little bit wayward when it counts. And we saw a slow start the week prior to Gold Coast cost them a win. These are 2 games that Collingwood now, they're going to look in reflection and be steaming about. Now, as I said when they lost to the Gold Coast, they probably would take a loss now instead of a loss closer to finals. But back-to-back losses starts putting a little bit of doubt in your head, and it's something that I really don't hope gets deep rooted into Collingwood's systems and mindset, because they have been the best team in the comp this year. Can't argue that. And some people now going as far as doing like ladder predictors and showing that they're going to drop out of the top 4 and everything else. I think that's a bit far reaching. That being said, I'm coming from a point where Richmond have won their last 2, Collingwood have lost their last 2, and I'm actually thinking that Richmond won't beat Collingwood, but can give Collingwood a red-hot crack. So, if that is the case, if Richmond do take it to Collingwood next week and Collingwood only just win, that could be a little bit alarming, because this is a game that Collingwood should absolutely destroy Richmond in. But this was not without people trying to discuss the legalities of how the game went down. A lot of people trying to say that Collingwood was stitched up by the umpires. When you actually have a look at the free kick count at the end of the game, I am almost certain Fremantle lost the free kick count, and I will confirm that in a minute. It was... Where's the free kicks? Show it to me, please. Yeah, Collingwood had 4 more free kicks for the game. Both clubs actually had more free kicks than their average for the year. 44 of them giving out. Some of the most outrageous free kicks as well. There was a 50 paid against Luke Jackson for stepping over the mark. It was marginable. Players do that every week. They paid it. There was other 50s that were paid that were very questionable. It was a very poorly umpired game on both accounts. So you can't point finger at those instances and isolate them, because it was for both teams over the course. It just come down to one team being more accurate than the other and seizing opportunity, and Fremantle was that team. On the back of a player that I don't think many people would have been talking about as the player to really stand tall for Fremantle in this game, but it's the man that I gave 1 vote to, and it's Patrick Voss. He had 12 disposals, 10 kicks and 2 handballs, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 370 metres gained, 6 goals, a game-high 6 goals, mind you, and 8 score involvements. The next best when it came to goals, I think was maybe 2 goals, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Patrick Voss kicks 6, and then you've got collectively Steel Sidebottom, Brody Mychek, and Jamie Elliott combined for 6. That's crazy. That's Patrick Voss playing his best game for the club, and holy shit, yeah, he was sensational. I just couldn't get enough of him on the night. I thought he really stood tall in a team that they're always talking about Tracy, they're talking about a miss. Patrick Voss had a coming-of-age moment in this game. Truly did. The 2 vote I gave to Caleb Sarong. This is a man that you can't keep down. He's just absolutely incredible, this man. I would argue that Andrew Brayshaw has had the better year, so people saying Caleb Sarong is challenging for the Brownlow, I can see that happening. I just think Andrew Brayshaw's had a better year than he has. That's just collectively over the course. 37 disposals, 21 kicks, 16 handballs, 3 marks, 3 tackles, 9 clearances, 672 metres gained, 1 goal, and 9 score involvements. Going head-to-head with the man that I gave 3 votes to, Caleb Sarong could have very well gotten the 3 votes here, but I thought the man I landed on had the edge on him just slightly, and that was Nick Dacos. 43 disposals, 28 kicks and 15 handballs, 4 marks, 7 tackles, 8 clearances, 778 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. Seeing Caleb Sarong and Nick Dacos go head-to-head was a sensational battle, and when collectively they combine for what? They had 80 disposals between the two of them. That is huge. I just love when cinema is painted for us in football, and this was a very Hollywood cinematic kind of experience. Collingwood fans probably up in arms that they've lost the last 2. Should have very well won the last 2, at least in my eyes. Fremantle winning this game gives them utmost confidence moving forward, and if you give confidence to the right people, they think they can rule the world. And if you give it to Fremantle, they are the team right now outside of the top 4 configuration that I feel can do the most damage in September if everything falls their way. Very underrated team, Fremantle. I think they get a lot of shit spoken about them, but when you look at their list in isolation, they are fantastic, and I think come September, if they are in that top 8, they could be one to keep a very sly eye on. On the flip side, and on the same token for Collingwood, though, they are still without a handful of players to still come back into this team. No Jeremy Howe in this lineup, so there's an intercept marker lost. A player gets, like Patrick Voss, gets off the chain with 6. They still have no Jordan De Goey. They didn't have Tim Membry in this game, I don't think. There was still another 2 or 3 players outside of that. Bobby Hill is the big one. They've got players to come back. I think they're right. They're happy to drop games here. They'll still finish in the top 4. I still feel they're still the best in the comp. I still feel they will be there on grand final day. Very much so think at this point in time it's Collingwood Geelong. I think the only team that puts any doubt in my mind that they could be there is Adelaide, because outside of Collingwood and Geelong, even though Brisbane's playing okay, I think Adelaide have the more comprehensive kind of team going for them. So it'll be an interesting watch, but as a Collingwood fan, if you're watching, I wouldn't be concerned. I mean, drop games now, that's okay. Come September, you'll be flying. We were just talking about Adelaide's list and how comprehensive I think it has been built. The last game of the round, I think, exemplifies that fact. It was Adelaide hosting the Gold Coast at Adelaide Oval. We've seen these teams fight it out before. It fell the way of Gold Coast earlier in the season by the slimmest of margins. But this game was a game that Gold Coast was never in it. Now, Damien Hardwick has come out and said some teams have a kick in the nuts moment in a season, and this was their kick in the nuts. I think this was a very humbling moment for Gold Coast, because their win against Collingwood the week prior, I think they got a little bit off the chain with that win. I feel it was a win they were very much lucky to have. Put a couple more minutes left on the clock, and I think Collingwood win that game. They were out of this game at quarter time. They were further out of it at halftime, and if you were a Gold Coast fan, you were almost going back to the airport to get your plane home, because this game was dead rubber from start to finish, and Adelaide made sure that the thing that they got done in this game was not only win, but percentage boost. These are the clubs that need to do so, and they did so emphatically in this game. Do you want to know how bad that kick in the nuts was? Because I'll tell you. At quarter time, Adelaide led 3-3-21 to 2 behinds, and then at half time, it was 9-5-59 leading 4 behinds. Gold Coast doing to Collingwood. The week prior, Collingwood couldn't kick a goal against them in the first half. Rock up to Adelaide, they can't kick a goal in the first half. Then in the second half, it got worse, and it never looked like it was ever going to be wrestled out of Adelaide's control. 13-9-87 leading 5-9-39. The final score line 16-11-107, defeating the Gold Coast 6-10-46. 61 points the way of Adelaide. If you had told me this was going to be a 10-goal win, I would have told you were crazy, because I would have expected a hell of a lot more competitiveness out of the Gold Coast. But it wasn't there. And when you look at the player stats individually, you can understand why there was a breakdown, because there was only a handful of players for the Gold Coast that really were of mention at all. I mean, Matt Rowell has 30 disposals, has 12 clearances, lays 9 tackles. Sam Flanders has a pretty reasonable game. He takes 9 marks and has 6 clearances from 28 disposals. But outside of that, not much going on. I mean, Noah Anderson has 27, but wasn't very accurate with ball in hand. Not the Noah Anderson we saw the week prior. Jared Witt's I thought at least got beaten in the ruck by Riley O'Brien. Huge game for him. They kept Dan Rioli to 11 disposals off of half-back, and that's not very Rioli-like. Like, I thought this is a game that he would have relished the opportunity. it was just Adelaide everywhere. And at one point, it was going to be hard to kind of differentiate which players I would talk about in this video as Adelaide's best, because there were so many putting their hands up for it. Rioli did end the game with a leg injury, sadly. I don't know the severity of it, but that was a half-time replacement. So, obviously, as I said, he didn't get to have much impact in the game, which took an avenue off of half-back, and we know Gold Coast like to do that push. John Noble can't do it on his own. Mitchell Hinge got done with a hip injury in the second quarter, so both teams using their subs for injuries before half-time. Both teams also very critical to their team setup. Rioli and Hinge both defensively sound. But Adelaide were just so impressive in this game. Even if Rioli was on the field and Mitchell Hinge stayed on the field, I still feel that wouldn't have changed much at all, because they already had that ascendancy by halftime anyway when the moves were pulled on Rioli. So, incredible game. Absolutely incredible. This is where Adelaide are now being spoken about by many as a premiership threat. I've been saying for years now, at least for the last 2 to 3 years, that Adelaide, if they can play a consistent enough brand, they can challenge any team in the competition. And they can be a dark horse when it comes to finals. They're not just dark horsing now. This is a top 4 team. This is a team that has drafted and traded so incredibly well, invested time into their own players instead of trying to grab each and every player where they can. They get a trade here or there, they find a need, they fill it, they back in their own systems, their own players, and they hit their straps, and they're doing it at the right time. This is a team that I feel could very well be in a grand final conversation. I still feel on a personal level it's Collingwood versus Geelong. Wouldn't be upset if Adelaide made it there. I know Tex Walker still probably has a bee in his bonnet about Richmond beating them in 2017. He'd like to get a flag before he finishes his career. Very well think that if Adelaide do make the grand final this year and they win, Tex Walker probably hangs the boots up. Very interesting watch with these clubs though, because as I said earlier with Essendon, Gold Coast still have a game in hand. And when we talk about the ladder in a moment after this game, this could be a game up against Essendon late that could determine whether or not they play finals. And I feel that is a very unfair advantage to other teams. How they play this game, I don't know. It's being floated that they're going to have to play 2 games in the last round of the season. They're going to have to play against Essendon in the bye between finals, which means they're going to have players that could get injured in that bye, and it's going to hamper them for finals, but they also have the upper hand because they haven't had a week off. Again, AFL, pigeonhole, they've got themselves in there, only got themselves to blame. But Adelaide, emphatically better on the weekend, and I think they have put the competition on notice. All eyes on them, and deservingly so. With the votes, as much as I would have loved to have given Matt Rowell a vote for his effort, I can't justify it. The 3 players I landed on, I feel, were best for Adelaide collectively. Isaac Rankin was in conversation for a vote here. Matt Rowell was in conversation at one point. I just couldn't justify the ends of the means. But I landed on Wayne Malira for the 1 vote. I thought his defensive game was brilliant. He had 21 disposals, 17 kicks and 4 handballs, 12 marks, 1 tackle, 1 clearance, 461 metres gained and 6 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to another defender, well, midfielder turned defender that is, Rory Laird. I thought him and Wayne Malira combined defensively really set up a lot of the rebound work for Adelaide over the course of the day, which set up their scores, their avenues to score, and won them the game as big as they did. Laird had 23 disposals, 17 kicks and 6 handballs, 11 marks, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 243 metres gained, 3 score involvements. When you look at the marks for this game, just to break down how influential their marking abilities were, they took a game high 12 and 11. Josh Worrell was the only one. Another defender I feel who's been very underappreciated this year was Josh Worrell. Could have been in conversation for votes as well. But when they've taken 23 marks between them, collectively we can go down the line here, they took more marks than Ben King, Dan Rioli, David Swallow, Jared Witts, Ben Jepson, Will Powell, Ethan Reid, Matt Rowell, Jed Walter, we could probably even go up, and close enough to Sam Clohessy, Bailey Humphrey and Leo Lombard collectively. They've taken more marks between 2 of them than half of Gold Coast team did. That to me spoke volumes when it came to deciding the votes. I thought both of them defensively were absolutely brilliant. Best on ground is given to a player who I feel should be in the conversation this year for Recruit of the Year. And I feel just like Matt Kennedy, well under the radar. And that's Alex Neil-Bullen. Brought into Adelaide to fit a role, play a niche, and he has done so perfectly. He had 31 disposals, which was a game high, 20 kicks and 11 handballs, 7 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 539 metres gained, 3 goals, and a game high 12 score involvements. You cannot understate how influential he has been for Adelaide this year, and it just further compacts their ability to draft the right players. They paid overs for Isaac Rankin, and a lot of people questioned at the time whether that was the right move. I was one of them. I'm now getting proven wrong. Alex Neil-Bullen comes in, fits the role well, plays that role perfectly. They have targeted the right players, and it's going to return huge dividends. This could be an Adelaide lineup that we see playing in the grand final this year, and to many, that'd come as a shock. With all the votes over round 19 tallied up, we can now have a look at who is leading on the leaderboard for the Hip and Shoulders 2025 MVP Award. Again, I do this purely for the love of doing it. I'm very passionate about AFL. I just want to share my opinions with everybody. If you agree, if you disagree, it opens up conversations to be had down in the comments below. But our top 5 is starting to take shape. There is a little bit of a gap now between certain players, but I think collectively when we look at the players that have played this year, this is probably the best 5 or 6 players that we have seen, maybe minus 1 or 2. In 5th place on 20 votes, I have Fremantle's Andrew Brayshaw. In 4th place on 22 votes, we have Geelong's Bailey Smith. In 3rd place on 23 votes, we have Fremantle's Caleb Sarong. In 2nd place, tied on 26 votes, we have Adelaide's Jordan Dawson and Gold Coast's Noah Anderson. And in 1st place on 30 votes, we have Collingwood's Nick Dacos. I really feel at this point in time with the Brownlow, Nick Dacos, Jordan Dawson, Noah Anderson are probably the 3 that are going to be up the top. Very interested to see if that is the case come Brownlow night, because I think they have been the more consistent 3 of the players that I've been voting for over the course of the year. I've got Nick Dacos here with a 4-vote gap. Probably not going to be the case when it comes to the the Brownlow night itself. But hey, it's just my opinion, as I said. So don't shoot me, okay? Please don't. With my votes out of the way and the more individual kind of player approach, we can now turn our attention to what matters most, and that is the AFL ladder after 19 rounds of football. And as I've been saying throughout the course of this video, winning margins, percentages, they're all going to start coming into play. And when you see the points and percentages on the ladder here, it's going to be completely evident as to why. Collingwood are in 1st place on 56 points, but they only sit ahead of Brisbane, who is in 2nd place by half a game. 54 points. They could and should be still 2.5 games clear, but the last 2 losses have put them in a position where they can drop down to 2nd place. Adelaide sit in 3rd on 52, which is only a game behind Collingwood. So Collingwood now, potentially, if things don't fall their way, could drop down to 3rd next week. Geelong are in 4th on 48 points, but they are tied with Hawthorn in 5th, GWS in 6th, and Fremantle in 7th, who are all on 48 as well. This is where percentages are a little bit far between some clubs, but between Hawthorn and GWS, there is only 3% to be made up, and it doesn't take much for that 3% jump. Geelong have a almost 10% jump on GWS. On Hawthorn, rather, sorry. So I think they're comfortable in that spot right now in 4th place. And Fremantle are just shy of, I believe, 7% behind GWS. So there'd have to be some things happen, 2 teams and 4 teams. But this is where winning and winning comfortably against the lower tier teams in the competition need to happen for these clubs. The top 8 is rounded out by the Gold Coast, who finish on 44 points but drop down to 8th with their loss. Outside of the top 8, we have the Western Bulldogs in 9th, who are currently a win behind. If they do pick up a win this weekend and the Gold Coast lose, Bulldogs move up into 8th place. Sydney are 2 wins outside of the 8. Things can happen. They've got GWS this coming week, so if they can pick up a scalp, they're truly alive. I don't know whether they will, because I think GWS are going to get them. But with the fucking momentum that Brodie Grundy and Heaney and Warner have, anything can happen with Sydney. In 11th place, we have Port Adelaide. In 12th place, we have Carlton. We have Melbourne in 13th and Essendon in 14th, both on 24 points. We have St Kilda in 15th and Richmond in 16th, moving up the ladder, tied on 20 points. North Melbourne dropped to 17th with 18 points, and West Coast, bottom of the ladder, with 4 points. It's crazy to think Richmond right now are only 2 wins behind Carlton. That is insane. That is a club tipped to win a premiership versus a club tipped to not win a game all year. This ladder is going to be an interesting watch because Bulldogs and Sydney still mathematically well and truly alive. Teams like the Gold Coast, Fremantle, GWS, even Hawthorn need things to go their way, and there are some matchups coming up over the next couple of weeks that could see teams drop in and out. So keep an eye on it, but this race home is going to be tight. There is only one more thing for myself to do before we bring this video to a close, and that is to announce my team of the week for round 19. Some of these decisions I have made won't sit right with some people, but I have made them. Again, my opinion. If you disagree, if you agree, let's talk about it. But this is how my team lines up for round 19. In my back line, I have Lockie Whitfield and Christian Salem in the back pockets, and Jack Henry at full back, with Jarman Impey and Nasiah Wanganeen Malira on the halfback flanks, and Nick Vlosten at centre halfback. Across the midfield, I have Oliver Dempsey and Will Ashcroft on the wings, and Isaac Heaney named as captain in the centre. In my forward line, I have Alex Neil-Bullen and Keziah Pickett on the half-forward flanks, and Jeremy Cameron at centre half-forward, with Sean Manor and Dylan Moore in the forward pockets, and Patrick Voss at full forward. Brodie Grundy takes charge of the ruck for another week, with Nick Dacos, the vice-captain, in ruck rover, and Caleb Sarong in rover. The interchange sees Tom Green, Tim Taranto, Jacob Hopper, and Josh Dunkley. The substitute for the round is Jordan Sweet, and coach of the round is Adam Uze. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. The round has officially been recapped. Thank you for joining me through my deliriousness. I appreciate it. If you did enjoy this video and you do enjoy the content I put out here, do consider hitting that like button down below. If you want to get on board the community we are building here, feel free to hit that subscribe button as well. I currently have an AFL 26 player career mode going down on my gaming channel, so if you want to see AFL action in a gaming format, feel free to jump on over and check that out as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.